Hi, this is Korinne Carpino, and today we're going to paint this cute little elf ornament. I'm going to start with my design sheet, and I'm working on a piece of alcohol ink hardcore art panel by Ranger. And I've taped the design sheet to the panel and inserted a piece of blue Ceril transfer paper. The next thing I'm going to do is trace over my design to transfer it to the art panel. And I'm going to speed this video up so you don't have to watch me trace in real time. These hardcore art panels have like a vinyl coating on both sides, so you can paint on both sides of them. They're really handy to make an ornament with. And now that I have my design on here, I'm going to start to add some color. I'm going to use salmon ink for the face, and I'm sorry you can't see my ink palette. My inks are all dried out in a palette, so I can just pick up a little bit with my brush. I just want a light coat of ink on his face, just a little bit of color. Any light colored alcohol ink will do. That's in kind of a face tone. A little bit of watermelon ink. You just let me drop a little bit in for his cheeks. I'll put a tiny little dot for his nose. And then I'm going to start working on the hat. So I'm coming in with just a little bit of watermelon. So any light red ink is fine. And I'm just getting in some color at this point. You'll note I left a couple areas open. Those are the lighter areas in the hat, and so I'll just thin some ink out with a little bit of alcohol on my brush and fill those in later. So now I'm going to use a darker red ink. This one is Crimson by Ranger. And I'm going to use it to put in all of the shadow areas of the hat. My ink is fairly thick. I can control where it's going. And so I'm just going to add some shadow areas into the hat. A few more shadows, blending it into the watermelon ink that's there. And with a damp brush, I'm just going to start to pull some of that lighter ink around into the areas of the hat that have the highlights. So you'll see as I do this entire painting, I'll work back and forth between putting down ink, lightening the ink with a little bit of alcohol on my brush. Now, when I have that alcohol on my brush, my brush is just damp, so I'm really dipping it into the alcohol, wiping it off very well so the bristles are just damp. And just get the line of that hat in. And I'm cleaning up this line a little bit with a damp brush. Adding a little bit of shadow there and a little bit of shape to the right side of the hat. And now I'm coming into the ear. So very light coat of watermelon on the top of the ear. And then I'll come back in with some more watermelon that is more dry and add that to the inner ear. The next step is I'm going to start to add ink to his coat. I'm working with crimson at this point, crimson red, and I'm just getting ink down into the arm areas. I'll need to add shadows and lift it in just a little bit. Now I'm coming in with a little cranberry ink and just getting some of these shadows. So basically the reds, depending on what brand you're using, it's just a shade darker. And so there would be shadows where the ball is held up against his chest. Wiping my brush off well and just pulling a little highlight out. Now I'm just getting a little bit of ink into the arms, the forearms. Notice that my brush, I'm using a rounded stroke to give some dimension to those arms. Again, working my ink, highlights, just looking to give more dimension to the arms. And you'll see me come back to those arms later as well. I'm really working to get them dimensional with my brush strokes. Now I'm going to come around the bottom part of the ball. My ink is very thick. You can see me wiping my brush off even after I put the ink on it. I want nice thick ink to get a nice dark shade. So the thicker the ink, the darker the value I'm going to be able to get. And now a little bit thinner ink for the rest of the coat, moving in an up and down motion and blending into the dark area. And a little more dark underneath there, a little more of a shadow. We want it to really look like he's dimensional and that ball is coming out, sitting outward from his chest. Now we're going to do the top of his pant legs or his shorts. I'm not sure what they are, shorts or pants. And just coming back and forth. First with the cranberry ink, because it's for the shadows. So I'm going to get all of those in first. And now I'm going to get some crimson ink and come back in and just fill them in. Now I'm making my brush strokes horizontal, nice short strokes to give some texture to those pant legs. So I'm looking at this and I want some more shadow underneath the coat to make it stand out some more. I'm coming back in with a little bit of cranberry ink and you can see how that really made the difference between the coat and the pants. Coming in a little bit, again, more cranberry ink under that ball, in the crook of his arm, underneath his collar of his jacket. And yet again, more highlights. So you can see as I pull that ink around, it makes his arm look more rounded. Just cleaning out the red from the area where it would be the white of the cuff of the jacket. And now I'm going to come in. You could use any of your gray inks, or this is probably diluted black down to gray. I just diluted it with a lot of alcohol. And now I'm tapping in the shadow areas of the hat. So there's a shadow under the fluffy, furry trim there. And I'm wiping my brush off so I can just break this up a little bit and move it back. Again, trying to create the look that there's dimension to this. So where the trim meets the red part, there'd be a little bit of a shadow there. I'm going to just, while I have this on my brush, just pull back the serral line from the side of the face. And I'm just lightening up some of those shadows on the hat with that damp brush. Coming in with a little bit of that salmon ink I used before and just defining the side of his face. Okay, I have a liner brush and very, very dry teakwood ink. And I'm just pulling some lines for hair between the rim of the hat and the face. And I want to define this a little bit more, and so I'll come in with a little bit of black ink as well. Pitch Black Ranger ink. Let me just give him a little bit of sweet hair there. And now you can see with the shadows I put in the rim how the hat really stands out. Time to give him some eyes. And so just using a Sharpie marker for the eyes and the mouth. I'll come back into the eyes later and do a highlight. Just a little bit of shape so we can see where the cheek goes. And he needs eyebrows. And so just a couple little dashes for eyebrows. And he is one happy little elf. Okay, let's paint the ball. And I'm going to use honeycomb for the ball. And I'm just coming around his gloved area. Now I'm just coming back in with a damp brush, lightening that up a little bit. Bringing that color out a little. Just looking at where the midtones and the lights would be. And the light's coming from the right. And so we're just lightening up the ink on the right-hand side of the ball. Now I'm coming underneath that ball with butterscotch, which is a browner color, yellow. And just getting the bottom of the ball would have the shadow on it. So I'm just getting that butterscotch on there. And now I'm coming in with some sepia ink, sepia brown. So any color, light color, warm color brown would do. And getting the shadow in on the very bottom of the ball. And we'll be blending all of this. And you can see I'm just coming back in with a damp brush and just blending that color together. Adding some texture as well. And I'll come around this other little glove. I'm using a number 8 brush. It's a craft brush. It's probably in my better brushes, it would be a 4. But use the brush size that you find is comfortable for you. I always try to use the biggest brush possible. Okay, I'm over here on the left-hand side and you can't see. Just moving my ink around on a piece of scrap paper to just try to get the right consistency, because you can see I came in with really thick ink in order to do the shadow between his glove and the ball. And we'll get the shadow underneath his little collar there and on the left side of the ball, and just start to blend those together. So that ball's starting to have dimension. And we're going to add that highlight. Just pull it up and around. And I'm using the curved strokes because I want to make this look rounded. So we're painting with the ink. The direction our strokes go in is very important to creating the, I keep saying the word dimension, but creating the dimension in our figures. Okay, coming in with a little bit of teakwood ink now. I guess these are his socks. And just, again, doing that rounded part at the knee. And then filling in with a little bit of the teakwood ink. Just a lighter shade, a little more alcohol in it. And his boots are black. So I'm just coming in with some pitch black. And we're not going to see much of them anyway because we're going to put some greens in. So again, with the gray, I've switched to a number 1 brush. I have a small space to get into. So this is my gray or diluted black ink. And I'm just getting some shadows in for the trim on the top of his jacket. And I'll do the same thing with the trim around the sleeves or the end of the sleeves here. Just fiddling with that one sleeve again and the shape of it, rounding it out. And let's just get a little bit of black in here. Again, nice rounded stroke. So the glove doesn't look flat. Filling that in. Don't forget the thumb. He's really getting cute. And we'll do the other glove. Just very carefully. Okay, pretty happy with that. So he's looking pretty good. I am going to use some snowcap. So I have snowcap ink that I've let sit in my palette for a while and start to evaporate. And you can see me dabbing it on my test sheet on the left-hand side of me. And I'm just dabbing it into the hat. So by letting the ink thicken a little bit, I can make it has great texture. And I can add not only the white but the texture. Now, as this dries, the shadows from underneath will show because the white ink will pick up some of that darkness underneath it. Will kind of bleed through. And so we will be able to, when it's completely dry, see those shadows. Because those cuffs are so tiny on the jacket, I'm coming in with a number 1 brush as opposed to my dental tool and just filling those in. What a cutie. Okay. I'm going to come in with a tiny little dab of white in the middle of both eyes. Now, if you didn't feel comfortable doing that with the snow cap, you could use a white gel pen. I'm coming in with a little bit of, I think this is sandal ink. Just any kind of light brownish color will do. And just tapping it into the background. You can see I poured it on my paper there, which is, I think, a piece of graphics Durabright white that I'm using for my test sheet. And I wanted to use the ink straight out of the bottle and very thin, but not pour it directly onto my painting. I come around that pom-pom. And I'm starting now to create some dimension in the background. I'm adding a little bit of gray. This is probably a flannel gray ink. You could use a moss green as well, but I just want to get a little darkness in here, especially on the left-hand side because that's more of the shadow side of the painting. And just tapping it in, and now I'm just coming back in. I want to break this up. So I'm coming back in with a damp brush and just dropping that alcohol into the ink and just breaking it up. You saw me, I'm going to dab some of this as I put it on with a napkin and then break it up some more. And I'm kind of trying to make this look a little vintagey. Because I think that little elf looks a little vintage. So that's for the background I'm going for. And now that my ink is drier on my brush, I'll get in around his hat and jacket. Just carefully. So I always start with my wetter ink away from a subject if I'm doing a background like this. And as that ink dries on my brush, I can get closer to the subject. Coming back in with a little diluted black ink and just adding a little base around here. He's got to stand on something. So we're just adding a little bit of base. You can see me just diluting that ink right down and then coming around on my paper, tapping at it as I put it on. And again, there's going to be greens in that area, so I'm not too worried. I'm coming in now with, again, with that snow cap, now that my background's on, and doing that pom-pom. And this elf is kind of quirky. He's got 2 pom-poms on his hat, one at the top and one at the end of the stocking part of it. And so a little bit of alcohol and dab at this. I wanted to get some gray around the side of that collar there. And I needed to be able to have some darker so I could see the pom-pom. And now I'm coming in with that evaporated snow cap ink. Now I have a little bit of green. And I'm going to just put some lines. I have a number 1 brush right now. And I'm using Everglades. You could use any color dark green that you like. And I'm just putting in some stems where I'm going to be putting some evergreen boughs. So with my Everglades ink, I'm just rolling it around, getting it so it's thicker and the alcohol's evaporating out of it. Checking to make sure I can do nice little skinny lines. And just coming in and scratching in, kind of almost doodling in some lines to make this little bow. Come all the way down. And I'm going to do this with each of those. I like to turn my page as I'm working, or my ornament in this case. It's just easier for me to get those marks in. And I've decided I want one more little stem of evergreen bough, and so I'll put that in. And now I can just use that ink that I have right on that piece of paper and just make my little short strokes. Notice the strokes are following the shape of the stem, so I don't lose that shape. And coming in now, my ink is even thicker, so it looks darker. If you can't get it dark enough, you can add a little bit of black ink, just a touch, to your green ink, and just thicken it up a little bit. So see, his boots just kind of disappeared, but they're under there. All right, so I am happy. He looks like he's standing in a little pile of evergreen boughs. Adding a little botanical ink now, just on this side, to give some light in those boughs, since that's where the light's coming from. I'm going to take that #1 brush and just a little bit of crimson ink, create some berries, and block them. And then go back and do the outside of them, because the shadow again would be on the left side. I'm going to add a few more little crimson berries here and there. And then I have to decide what I want to do next. And I think what I'm going to do next is do some splatters before I do anything else. And so you can see I tore a paper towel to put over the elf, and I tear it so I don't end up with a hard line as I splatter. Unfortunately, you can't see the left side of that piece of paper. I've thinned out some of the crimson ink, and I'm just tapping my brush and putting some droplets down. Moving the paper towel, excuse me, I just want to get a little closer to the head, and I'll do the same thing on the right hand side. Okay, so that looks pretty festive now. I really like that. And I want a little bit of gold in there to match the gold on that ball, or the gold color. So I'm going to come back in with a little bit of that honeycomb ink. So it's just a rich yellow, and put in a few little ornaments, I guess. And that kind of pulls that gold color down through, putting a few dots here and there. Just getting the color around the elf to kind of pull that whole thing together. I want your eyes to go around the whole painting. I'm going to just add a little shadow on the left-hand side of these, and we'll be done. So what I did was I drilled some holes in the top of the board, which was very easy to do, and added some red ribbon, and it's ready to hang on the tree. So I hope you enjoyed this demonstration today. If you're an Alcohol Ink Society member, the design sheet will be in the December experience. And I really, really hope that you paint the elf and enjoy the process. Happy holidays!